Rodriguez,
I am here.
Mr. Arnold, Ms. Banks, Ms. Bell, Mr. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Carter,
Here.
Ms. Clark,
Here.
Ms. Friedman,
Here.
Reverend Gordon, Ms. Harding,
Here.
Ms. Howe,
Here.
Ms. Mendoza-Locke, Mr. Knowles,
Here.
Mr. O'Connor,
Here.
Mr. Stengel,
Here.
Major White,
Here.
Ms. White.
Thank you. We'll do recognition of visitors, and we'll start here in the corner with Lenny.
Lenny Tamansky, CJCC.
Paul Lewis Recovery Council and St. Paul Community Center and MPI Association.
Carol Conlon, Lucas County Guardianship Services Board.
Richard Arnold.
Matt Bell, Team Recovery. Juan Duarte, Team Recovery.
Although Melissa Medlin, UNICEF.
Thank you.
Juanita Helbig Sanchez, board staff.
Shannon Hitch, board staff.
I think we got everyone. So we're going to move into the meeting minutes from June 6, 2023, and we'll need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Any questions? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes. And now we're going to hand it over to Jenny. We have a pretty full agenda today, so we're going to move pretty quickly through it.
I'm going to start on page 7 for the Lucas County 2022 calendar year audit. We are part of Lucas County's audit, and it was completed in May of 2023. They're on a calendar year, so it ran from January of 2022 through December of 2022. We had about $8.5 million of federal funds that we spent in that time period, and actually only 19,000 of that was detail tested. The whole thing was reviewed, but only 19,000 was detail tested. And that was actually the hospital access funds, which you're going to hear about later on, that we got some more of. They do a whole system. I don't know if you guys are familiar with audits, but the auditors do a whole system of what they test and how they decide what to test, and it's based on risk. So if you have a finding in a previous year, they go through a cycle of every 3 years they test things. So the last couple years we've had very few things tested, so I imagine this next year we'll have more tested. But if you want to review the whole audit, it's actually, there's a link listed there for what you can review. There were no findings for any of our funds, and there was no findings for Lucas County as a whole that would affect us. And I can answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay, so we're going to move on to item number 6, and it looks like Elijah actually has the next several items, so we'll go ahead and get started. I know there's going to be a couple votes in there.
Yes. Yeah, so if you'll see on page 7, the civil commitment designations, you may remember that in June, you all approved a list of these already, but one was left off, Assurance Health. They are a inpatient senior hospital in Maumee that began services in Lucas County in 2021. So this motion in the middle of the page is just to approve them to do involuntary admissions and to allow our attorneys to represent the clients. So there's that motion for your consideration.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any questions?
Where is Assurance Health located?
Maumee.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes.
The next one is the hospital access funds allocation. Back during the early days of COVID, when the Northwest Ohio Psychiatric Hospital had decreased capacity, Ohio MHRSB provided funding for indigent patients to access private hospitals. This funding has continued over the years, and we have a new allocation of over $200,000 to provide hospitals the ability to admit patients and for us to provide payments for those services up to 7 days. In addition, the Ohio MHRSB has given us a one-time allocation to pay for a week of services while this new allocation was being figured out. So on the top of page 8, you'll see 2 motions. One is to accept the allocation of the $200,000 and to allow the executive director to have agreements with Flower Hospital and Mercy St. Charles, and then a second motion to accept the $8,000 for that week of services.
And we can do those together?
Yep.
So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Okay. Any questions?
Is that $800 a day changed?
If I recall, it was $750 when we started.
That's what I
it.
thought, yeah, so it's gone up.
Is this in addition to, or if they don't have Medicaid?
It's if you lack any other payer source.
Right.
Is this a one-time deal for people? Like if they did it, if they went through once and then maybe say 2 weeks later?
No, it's,
Okay. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes.
Next, you'll see the problem gambling funds allocations. These funds from Ohio MHRSB are for prevention, screening, treatment, and recovery services for problem gambling. Ohio MHRSB funds these programs throughout Ohio, including Lucas County. Locally, ZEP is the agency who has the problem gambling services and is really a leader in the state for those services. So this motion is to allocate the funds we receive for that to ZEP Center to continue that work in treatment and prevention of problem gambling.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Okay. Those in favor? Oh, wait, do we have a motion? Sorry. Oh, yeah.
Move in second.
Was there a question? Okay. Wait,
you're,
are these?
no, it's-
Oh, I went too far.
Yeah, you're what you want.
Okay. All right, so let's see here. Those in favor? Those against? And those abstaining? Motion passes.
Great. Next, you'll see the countywide suicide prevention campaign. We provided a little update on suicide stats in Ohio and locally. Locally, we have seen a decrease in suicides over the past couple years, which is very exciting. Although there's been a total number of decreases, there are some populations that have seen a rise in those, including females, Black and Asian women. So these funds for the past couple of years, we've allocated these funds to our prevention agencies to have strategies with specific populations. We provided a graph there that kind of shows you the nine agencies that have participated in. We're happy to report that they're all very excited about this opportunity again. And each allocation is really based on the agency size and what their strategy is. So there's a series of motions. I believe you're able to take all of those motions at once if you so choose.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions?
I just wanted to mention to everyone, if some of this looks familiar to you, it's because this was a part of our 120-day notice process as well, where we declined to fund them pending notification from Ohio MHRSB that we get the money. So we got the money, now we're going back to get the funds.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, so we will be, the next 9 we'll do together, and those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? And those abstaining? Motion passes. Jenny, item number 10, late submission.
This is on the bottom of page 10 and the top of page 11. So you guys are familiar with late audit submissions for our agencies in accordance with our agency agreements. This one is a little bit different because they run on a calendar fiscal year. So normally we bring it to you 6 months ago. This one was late for its June 1st deadline, and it was Mercy Foundation. And I've had communication with them. They did submit their financial audit, but their single audit has not been completed, and it is expected to be completed the beginning of September. So there's a motion at the top of page 11 for authorizing Scott to withhold payment of funds for Mercy Foundation until they submit their audit for December 31st, 2022.
Did they have any findings in their audit?
They did not. We have to keep in mind that they are a larger organization, and so they have their own rules to be part of. They submitted their financial audit. Their single audit was not actually technically due yet for them until the end of September. So we are a small funder in this larger organization. So they are working to get it submitted to us, but.
So is this, is there a history of that with them, or is this like the first time?
This did happen last year, although it was not as delayed.
Should we anticipate this occurring given they're on a different financial cycle than we, and their requirements are different than ours?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it is what it is. It's the same standard that we set for everyone, so.
Yeah. Are there other organizations, medical organizations who fall short with submitting the documents that they need?
Well, so everyone that receives the provider agreement has to follow this requirement,
Right.
because it's in the provider agreement. So typically you would see those come to you at the other 6 months of the year because they would be on a June 30th fiscal year end. Mercy is the only one that is on a December 31st year end. And part of a hospital system.
So once we receive that single audit in September, this will be brought back up and we'll allocate the funds at that time, or how does that work?
We don't typically bring it back to you. When they submit it, we go ahead and pay them.
Okay.
Yep.
So when you hold payment, what does that mean? I know they're not getting payment, but does that mean patients can't go? What else does that mean?
No, there are no other repercussions other than a financial delay of payment for them. So patients are still receiving care. There is no, and for them, it's their grant payment. So it is the, I just lost my train of thought.
Trying to do the math. We already paid July and August, right?
Correct. It would be the September grant payment.
September.
Oh, okay. How much money are we talking? Did I miss it?
No, that doesn't say.
For the suicide prevention, their total fiscal year allocation is $47,000. So it would be 1/6 of that. Essentially, assuming it's one grant payment. And if they submit it, first week of September, there is no delay because it's a September grant payment.
All right, do we have a motion to approve?
I move.
Second? Okay. Any questions? I believe we just did that. Any further questions?
I'd like to mention that several years ago, you tightened this language up so that this was an automatic to the board. If there is a desire to reconsider that language, in our next provider agreement, we will certainly bring that back to you all.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes.
For what it's worth, I think it's important that it comes to the board because it gives us an early, keeps us apprised as the staff is, if there are any, not that this is one, but any early signals or things for us to be concerned about or watchful, vigilant on.
Yep, we're fine with bringing it to the board. I was just kind of sensing a bit of a reluctance to withhold funds. And just to remind you that it's an automatic requirement. I don't have the discretion where I once had the discretion. I no longer have that.
Moving on to item 11, Jenny, also?
This is on page 11. It's a two-part, so per our policy authorization for expenditures, section F, Scott is authorized to provide funds for emergency use for clients and other needs that emerge that are not part of our annual purchasing plan that would be an emergency need, as long as it is under is $25,000 or less. There were two of them in, and also according to the policy, we are to bring it to your attention at our next meeting. So the two paragraphs there are the two things that have come up since our last meeting. The first one was following the tornadoes in June. We were notified that 5 housing clients from NPI were displaced and they needed temporary housing at a hotel and food at Walmart. Food was provided from Walmart, and the total for that was $3,347.52 that we provided for them. It was paid to NPI and then paid by NPI and then reimbursed to NPI. The second one is you heard Scott mention that we received some notification of some funding from Ohio Moss. There are still some funding sources that we don't know yet as of today. And one of them is the addiction treatment program. And this provides funding for addiction treatment services and recovery support services for individuals in a certified drug court. And Lucas County Common Pleas Court has indicated that they are unable to spend funds without some of this funding for the period of July, August, September, what have you, until funds become available. So they requested emergency funding in order to keep some of their clients housed, to pay for rent and cell phones and some of the other ancillary. Scott provided an additional $25,000 allocation to the court to ensure the clients remain housed. Those advance funds then will be recaptured once we receive our allocation from Ohio Moss. So when we get that allocation, we'll take that $25,000 out of what their allocation would be. And I can answer questions on either of those two.
No, I'm just happy that we have this in place for these type of emergencies, because especially with the courts and then these families with NPI, I'm happy that we do this.
Out of curiosity, the 25,000 is the ceiling. Was the court in need of additional funds, and that's the cap that we could do this under, or?
It's actually stems from Ohio Revised Code rules or law. The cap is set at 25,000. Our policy mirrors that law. So.
But did they need more?
Of more that we just couldn't provide?
I'm sure their answer would be yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Although we might question their spending projections.
Yes. Okay, all right. Fair enough.
If they get through the 25,000, we will have an additional conversation, because the emergency still may persist, and the law does not necessarily, say that I can't do that more than once.
Okay.
Okay. That was my concern. You answered my next
We're
question.
certainly going to want to support them. The money's there, we're just waiting on Ohio Moss to get us the funds. And
Thank
there's
you.
probably a couple other situations like that as well.
Thank you.
You're sure they're gonna give us the funds?
Yes, it is in the state budget,
Okay.
so we're aware that those funds are, it's an assembly line. They're trying to work through each and every issue, every allocation that they get, so.
Linda, I feel you. I did also, we have about 160,000 from fiscal year '23 that we didn't spend. And I emailed our contact at Ohio Moss and said, will this be able to be carried over while we're waiting for formal approval? Would we be able to use it while we wait? And they said yes, via email, so.
Any other questions for Jenny?
So this notification language, this is just for notification of the trustees, and that's not requiring action.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, we're going to move on to the health officer designations. Elijah?
Oh, okay. The Health Officer Advisory Group met last month and reviewed 2 new applications and 9 renewals. And you can see those at the top of page 12 along with the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any questions? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes. And now we'll hand it over to Scott.
Okay. Well, this is a very business-like meeting today.
A lot of business.
A lot of stuff going on here. So we're going to
We got a lot of business.
Christina.
That's how we do things
Yeah.
around here.
I got a feeling I'm going
I
to
got
bring
the
this to a
gavel.
screeching halt.
Dave will be back next month. Dave will be back
Yeah.
next month.
So the first one's a rather easy one. The Ohio Moss American Rescue Plan Act capital funds and community capital grant approvals. You guys are aware that we've been working with Ohio Moss to fund Danny's Place. We have applied for $6 million in ARPA funds from Ohio Moss, and we also designated Danny's Place as our number 2 priority in the 23-24 Ohio Moss Community Capital Plan. Those applications now, we received preliminary approval, and now we're doing those, completing those official applications. A part of that process, as you guys are all aware, when we do community capital, there's certain things that the board must assure. This motion here assures those certain things. That we will agree to support the project as described in our applications, annually monitor the operations, and cooperate with Ohio Moss in developing alternative uses for the project if it defaults, and then of course authorizing me to execute those contracts. So essentially what we're doing is submitting the application to get the money. So there's the motion in the middle of page 12.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions?
Pretty straightforward.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? And those abstaining? Motion passes.
Okay, so I got the next one too, right?
Yes, you do.
It's all you. Nice.
So let's start with, if there are questions related to what's going on with the legal case, let's push that off into an executive session that we will be holding at our board meeting the 15th. So this is about a legal fees discussion. I just simply wanted to update you on legal fees, and then because we are essentially in need of a substantial allocation in order to satisfy what has already been spent. So, just as a history, you all allocated $50,000 in fees in June of 2022. Since that time, we've been working with Hickman and Associates and Crabb, Brown and James to respond to the filing by Rescue that they filed in April of 2022. We have paid invoices from Hickman of essentially $2,800. And if you also recall, that $50,000 originally was just designated to Hickman. Then we redesignated a portion of that $35,000 to Crabb, Brown and James. Well, we've only paid $2,800 to Hickman. We don't expect any more invoices from Hickman and Associates directly. So we will need to transfer all of the remaining balance, 12/1/61/34, to the Crabb, Brown and James contract. And by the way, we're going to have to do that retroactively, just so you know. We anticipate additional invoices throughout the remainder of the fiscal year to be somewhere around $240,000. That includes both legal and documentation fees. We've already paid $47,161.34. That included the $12,161.34 that was hanging out in the Hickman contract. And then all of the $35,000 from the Crabb, Brown and James contract. So as we sit here today, we believe we recommend transferring the balance. Okay, just in addition, we'll need about $193,000 in additional in our administrative budget to cover legal fees and documentation fees through 2023, of which $70,000 is expected to be reimbursed by Lucas County. We're also anticipating that an additional $150,000 in documentation fees through December of '23 will be needed. Consequently, we have an additional $150 in legal fees. I think I screwed that up, didn't I?
You did.
Okay, thank you. I'm smart enough to know that. I'm not really sure how I screwed it up, but I'm smart enough to know that. Let me just rephrase that. We need essentially, we need to transfer the money from the Hickman contract to CBJ retroactively. We need $193,000 added to our administrative budget. And then we need $150,000 allocated from that money to the Crabb, Brown and James contract.
Okay, so it's 193 inclusive of the 150?
Yes.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
where I screwed up, right?
No.
No, it's not?
The 150 is fiscal year '24.
Sorry, sorry. It's money we already spent plus money. You want to take it over?
Yeah.
Did I remind you that I was going to bring this meeting to a screeching halt? Nothing shows confidence. Go ahead, Jenny.
No,
You take it over.
fiscal year '23,
Thank
so
you.
what has already been spent, we need to transfer the $12,161.34 from Hickman to Crabb, Brown and James. We also need an additional $193 added to our administrative budget. And we're estimating an additional $150,000 from July through December that we're gonna add to the fiscal year '24 budget.
That makes sense.
So that's the three motions. The first one is to transfer the 12,000. The next one is for fiscal year '23 to add the 193
Okay.
for expenses that have already been incurred. And then the next one is 150,000 for expenses that we anticipate through December.
Got it. And
Thank
then we are anticipating being reimbursed $70,000 from Lucas County, and there are continuing discussions with respect to whether that reimbursement will increase,
Yes.
not decrease.
Yes. And there is a very interested party sitting in the audience right here as well, listening to this. So I'm trying not to overstate it. But yeah, so that's where we're at. The 193 has already been spent. That 70,000 that has been allocated by the county commissioners for documentation fees is already spent. And then, so it's a matter of ongoing discussions and what we can negotiate with the county commissioners. In this case, John Burrell brings that to the county commissioners for discussion. So.
Gotcha, thank you.
Thank you. Do we take each one individually?
You can take them all together.
Oh, you can.
So moved.
Yep. Second. Any further questions? Yes, Mr.
What are document management fees?
Oh, very good question. So, there was a substantial amount of information requested as a part of the case. There essentially, I think, is somewhere around 100 different questions we were to answer. All of those, well, I'm being careful here. We need to identify if any of those questions can be answered within the context of any documents that we might have, including any of the emails, any of the paper documents, any of the whatever it is related to the case. Because of the volume of the request, we needed a more sophisticated way of looking at that information. So our attorneys engaged a place called DISCO, which is a professional document system, and I believe it's in Colorado. And as you can see, it's rather pricey. We did not have the internal capacity to look at the volumes of data that we were going to be required to look at. And so we're using DISCO to do that.
It's like years of documents.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's years. Just think about what one meeting looks like. Now add in emails and all that fun stuff, so it's like an electronic way of looking for things.
Big warehouse.
Yeah. Yeah. It's.
Any further questions? Okay, we'll take all three of them together. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? And those abstaining? Motion passes.
Okay, now I'll try not to mess this next one. Thanks, Jenny. Really well, appreciate it.
Glad you're here.
So am I. Okay. So if you recall in June, we talked about the potential sublease options for 333 North Summit, 14th floor in particular. We just did a general overview, anticipated potential sharing of that space and additional renovations. Before I go any further, I want to recognize Commissioner Pete Gerken, President of the Board of County Commissioners, and Lindsay Simzak, who has been leading the discussion around relocation. I certainly invite both of them to add anything that you'd like to add, or maybe take a few seconds and give you an opportunity to say anything you'd like to say.
Few seconds, right? Ms. Gorshi, I'm interested to hear the board discussion. We're here to support some of the documents. Lindsay's done a great job of getting us to this point, but we're at a point of decision time now. We've worked well with ProMedica, and I'll just say this historically. I think this is a rare opportunity in downtown Toledo. We all know that we have to give up on this building. We tried immensely to see if we could do a retrofit here, $30–40 million, didn't seem to make sense. At the same time, ProMedica, because of their financial problems that they had, needed a tenant for a very beautiful building in downtown Toledo, facing for on Summit Street. So as we were finding a way to transition out of here for you guys and CSB and hope maybe the guardianship board. It came open that they had 16 floors of prime office space at a very good rate. So I think it kind of lined up that we should make that move. So rather than, and there's very few people out here offering the kind of office space that we want for multi-public health agencies to do it. So lined up pretty well. ProMedica has been a really good partner on this. They are going to provide us with a rate that is well below market rate for that class of office space. It's got the amenities, it'll have parking, you have all the things that you're more that you're going to want to have. But we have to now finally do the deal. Right? We brought in partnerships, we spent money in this, as you know, Collaborative, Lindsay's Time, Lathrop. So all the partners are lined up. And it really is in your hands at this planning committee meeting and then at the board to approve the sublease so that we can get going. So I think we have tried to give you the best opportunity to remove from this place and go to a place that's better, a place that will be welcoming, a place with lots of amenities. As you know, the commissioners would sign the master lease for all the floors, and then we are subleasing to the appropriate agencies to do it. So this would be our lease and a sublease to your organization through your board. And it's really for one floor of the amenities. CSB, as you know, has been your partners here for a long time. We're taking the majority of the space, but this is about the 14th floor, which is really one of the nicer floors on the building. So it's kind of up to you guys now. We hope we have made a compelling case, and we're just here. And I thank Lindsay publicly. She's really moved this thing along to do it. So I'm just here to be the support and lend my voice to the questions. Yeah, but we look forward to your approval.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Lindsay.
Yes, and Lindsay has been very helpful. So just kind of setting the scene a little more, you know, we had this conversation. This conversation has evolved actually over years. We have recognized the need for additional office space and to relocate. We actually attempted to identify additional office space pre-pandemic, and there was limited opportunities there. Recent, just looking at LoopNet and looking at what's available right now, the advertised square footage costs of what available space is in most cases higher than what we have negotiated, what the county's been able to negotiate here, and plus, you know, unknown renovation costs and just the quality of the facilities that are available is limited. So, you know, that seemed several options, right? Find new space. Then the second option would have been to partially, which was kind of our first option was to just assume a partial amount of the floor. And honestly, we have been in negotiations, gradually taking more and more of the floor, and then the uncertainty of what the Guardianship Services Board is going to be able to do just kind of tip the balance of, okay, we need to make a decision and assume the entire floor. Now, when we do that, there's an increased cost of about $37,000 annually when you compare 2 to 1, or option 2, which is a partial floor, to option 3, taking all of it, because if we were to take all of the floor, our renovation costs go from about $308,000. Renovation and fees costs go from about $308,000 to $78,000. So the difference between those is offset by about 6.2 years.
That's a nice thing.
So it gives us about 6 years to potentially realize the opportunities that the information transformation project might be giving us. The vision for the ITP has always been to integrate the data into our decision-making matrix, allow us to become an outcome-driven organization, and then to take that and expand that across the region. There are these information hubs that are setting up around the state, and actually one has been, or a couple of them have been working for several years now. In our space, board And it's usually clustered around regional hospital catchment areas. The opportunity in Northwest Ohio is there. And so we would have that ability and have additional office space should we be able to sell those wares. And if not, we have secured in our lease the ability to work with the Economic Development Corporation of Lucas County to have them revise our lease and rent that space that we may not need. Of course, then, our rent goes down, but that might cause us to have some renovation costs. Right? By then, we'll know what we might need a little bit more, and so we're really at a point now, a cost-benefit analysis and engaging in some lost opportunity costs, where I'm comfortable making the recommendation that we get approval to sign the sublease for the entire floor. And that would be at a cost of, in fiscal year '24, of an additional $22,822, assuming that the increase in rent does not start until, Jenny, I'm looking at you for that answer. January. Right, January. And then allocate an additional $78,939 in our administrative budget for miscellaneous moving expenses, renovations, and related fees associated with our relocation. So that $78,939, if we would only take the partial floor, that would be equal to the 308 number that is hiding somewhere in here. So in addition to that, we've had the sublease reviewed. David Arnold, a board member here, reviewed it. He's provided some comment. We also had an independent counsel review. We've provided that information to the county commissioners. I've reviewed the sublease that is coming back. They've integrated all of our comments into that and addressed all of our concerns. We still have an issue with parking sitting out there, but it isn't a major concern that we won't be able to overcome. Parking at the negotiated rate actually goes down a little bit for us, which, not a lot, but it's not a stick in the eye.
50 cents is 50
right?
cents.
And of course, what we're trying to do is lock up long-term parking, because it doesn't do us any good to have this nice, beautiful office space, but nowhere to park. So
Yeah, we have to provide parking for the team.
So we're at this place now where a decision it's really in your court. And the way I look at it is we preserve option 2 with accepting the third option, and provides us some additional opportunities that we might not have if we don't lock up this space now. So with that, I will stop and ask if there are any additional questions.
Okay, just so to make sure I got it right, we're actually going to be spending less in leaseholds by occupying the whole floor.
Correct.
That's really awesome, especially with the idea of the opportunity, as you said, to be the hub. I mean, we're leaders in this area, and I think it's important for the board to really understand that if the commitment we've made for IT and to then become a hub for the region is just exciting. And I look at us and say it's part of our responsibility, so that the fact that this has turned out the way that it has is kind of exciting. And we have 6 years, right?
We essentially have, 6 years offset the cost, right? The difference between renovations and no renovations. And, we could unwind that at the end of the 6 years and say, okay, we don't need this much space anymore. And of course, the trick would be to identify someone willing to assume a portion of that space that meets the qualifications for that area.
Correct.
And then we'd also be able to evaluate what renovations we might actually need.
Okay.
And it really depends on who would occupy that space, because we are a HIPAA compliant organization, we have personal and protected health information. We need to be able to make sure we secure those things. And,
Yeah, I just like the idea of having extra opportunities to really lead our community in being a hub. I mean, that right there, just like, whoa, seriously, Scott, that's awesome news. I think that that's important, and to provide a space for the team. This journey, like you had mentioned, has been a long one. We've explored everything, we've had conversations. I remember one time Jim and I and Scott talked about, well, what it would look like if we bought our building and this and that. I mean, this has been going on for a long time, and I think we manifested this incredible opportunity through those conversations. So, but thanks to all, and thank you, Commissioner.
As someone who's been involved in this for a long, long time, and
Yes.
I've worked at facilities and been, for us to have this opportunity now, which has been presented to us by a whole lot of other factors that have happened in our community and in downtown Toledo, it's created this opportunity for the county to be able to move these organizations out of this building and to avoid what would have been significant renovations here that never would really work, as well as being able to have that facility. Looking back on the journey, all right, I'm like, guys, this could not have laid out better for us compared to where we are today, and as Sen just described, where we firmly believe we will be tomorrow with the investments that were being made on the IT side. So with that being the case, I would move that we accept the recommendations as presented.
Second. Donna DeGardi. Are there any other questions?
I don't have any questions. I do have a comment. I know I'm new, but sometimes, so often, this sets a standard, because folks who are unfortunately dealing with mental illness, they're not always given the best. So from this organization setting the standard of going to some place that's nice, it sends a message that we want the best for our community, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're so correct in that. It speaks volumes.
Excellence is the standard.
There you go.
Yes.
So,
All right, any other questions? This is a big one, right?
It's a good one.
It's a big one. Super excited to be here. Okay, so, if there's no more questions, those in favor? Aye. Those against? And those abstaining? Motion passes. Congratulations.
This is a momentous day, August 1st. Today, at an earlier board meeting, the commissioners approved the first contract to build a new jail. With gratitude on behalf of my other fellow commissioners and staff, this could be the ending of a great day of moving the county and downtown, the justice system, the mental health system forward to, as you said, quality that we deserve. So fate has aligned, and you have not shut the door on fate as has come. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now we have open session. Yes, sir.
Not much going on at City Council, they can take a couple of these calls. But I do want to address a couple of things that are reading in the news media. Since last December, New York City has been ordering its first responders to pick up mentally ill people, transport them to a facility, even if they're not engaged in any kind of illegal activity. It's a huge civil rights violation of the here. And now that they've found a few that are doing better, the New York Times is all over it. They have found a few, and they're going to parade them in front of the news media like circus animals and claim that, oh golly gee, this works. When I hear the first responders When I hear those people praise this program, then I'll believe it. Until then, I'm worried that across the country, people are going to say, hey, if it worked in New York City, let's just start picking up our mentally ill people and transporting them in voluntary facilities. I continue to see this. This is last Friday's the Oxford shooting. His parents are facing charges. The father of the man who shot up a parade in Highland Park, Illinois, he's facing charges. The family of the man that drove his SUV into a parade in Wisconsin, his family had to go into hiding. The mother of the 6-year-old that shot her teacher, that one's, she's facing charges. And I've never heard of this before. The shooter in Pennsylvania who shot up the synagogue and killed 11 people. In the penalty phase, his defense attorneys are asking to exhume the body of his dead father to test it for schizophrenia or something like that, to prove that he has this history. I have never heard of that before. What I continue to see is news media who only mention the parents if they want to blame the shooting on them. And of course, my theory has always been prevention as opposed to intervention. If we help families today, then we don't need to blame them 6 months from now when a mentally ill family goes out and shoots somebody. So I continue to see that, continue to be concerned. Bear with me just for a moment here. As you probably know, the movie Oppenheimer has opened. It is about the development of the atomic bomb, and Toledo does have a tragic connection to this. 40 years ago, there was a homeless man named Chester Dane Peters that wandered the streets of Toledo. What little is known about him is that he was one of the engineers who worked on the creation of the atomic bomb. He was stationed in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, worked on the Manhattan Project. Everything was scrutinized by the FBI. They weren't allowed to leave. Everything was monitored. He was a supervisor. He worked on the electrical systems. Nobody knows. It's all classified. It's known that both during and after the war, he worked for Monsanto Corporation, Eastman Corporation, Union Carbide, all of which worked on the atomic bomb. And after the war, he suffered a complete breakdown. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and alcoholism. He lived on the streets of Toledo. Between the years of 1961 and 1976, he was hospitalized at the state hospital 6 times. Nothing unusual about that. If you know anything about the hospital at that time, they had between 2,000 and 3,000 patients. They served 21 counties northwest. And anybody didn't know what to do with. Alcoholic, dump them on the state hospital. And what would most likely happen, they would be medicated to the point where they couldn't function. And then when overcrowding became a problem, dump them on the streets. That's the way it was back then. Discharge planning back then was tell them what bus to take in order to reach the Cherry Street mission. He spent most of his time just down the street at the Campbell Bar, which used to be at 624 Ear Street. They appointed 4 different legal guardians for him. None of them were able to help him. He drank all of his disability check. His many delusions were that the FBI was going to track him down and kill him with laser beams or something like that. And he would sit in the Campbell Bar day after day and just talk to an empty bar stool, an imaginary friend. People can only speculate, was he haunted by the ghosts of all the people killed by the atomic bombs? I do not know what happened to him. There is no obituary on file in the Toledo Blade, but it just boggles my mind that we have someone walking the streets of Toledo, suffering from both mental illness and substance abuse, who worked on the development of the atomic bomb. That is why this board was created, so that we didn't have a state hospital that was nothing more than human warehousing, nothing more than people being dumped. This is why this board was created. So I want to remember his story, not just because of why this board was formed, but because it's people on the streets, they have a story to tell. They're not statistics, they do have stories. And I want to make sure his story is never forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Anyone else? Open session? Okay. Good meeting. We're adjourned. I like this.